Welcome to Blessed Uncertainty, where faith is a wide and wandering path. Today's episode is a heavier one, recorded in the midst of the Epstein files coming to light and the uncovering of the horrific abuses of children by people in power and exposing the powerful people who continue to protect abusers rather than children. Our first season is on children's spirituality and care, and if ever there was a moment to talk about protecting children, now is the time. So we reached out to today's guest, D.L. Mayfield. They are an author, a podcaster, and co-creator of the Strong-Willed Project, which is a project uncovering the harm done to children in evangelicalism and other high-control religions, focusing largely on the unfortunate writings of James Dobson, whose Christian parenting books have influenced decades of parenting. This episode was recorded on February 11th, just days after it was revealed that some of the abusers in the Epstein files shared James Dobson's parenting advice for controlling their victims. Again, today is heavy. We will talk about corporal punishment and abuse, and while we don't go into detailed descriptions about sexual abuse, it is referenced. So take care of yourselves however you need. But I would urge you, if you are an adult who has the privilege to listen, especially if you are someone who has not experienced abuse, please do not look away. Children cannot speak or advocate for themselves. It is entirely our moral responsibility to do so. And as James Baldwin says, the children are always ours, every single one of them, all over the globe. And I am beginning to suspect that whoever is incapable of recognizing this may be incapable of morality. Thanks for listening today. Hello, and welcome to Blessed Uncertainty, and welcome to our guest today, D.L. Mayfield, they, them pronouns, who is an amazing author, podcaster, works in the areas of exposing trauma of high control religion, and especially how that affects children and vulnerable people. And we're just really happy to have you on our show today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you.
And we'll, again, put this in our intro, but this episode is coming out right amidst the Epstein files and all of the abuse that's being uncovered that we know has been happening in the world, and how related that is to evangelicalism and James Dobson and religion and all of those places that it's all the same insidious evil. And so I've really respected your work and your commitment to telling the truth. I think that's something I told Danny when I was we were excited about having you on, is that there are a lot of people, I think, in the space where they critiquing the church in very, very correct and needed, necessary ways. But sometimes I feel like some of those podcasts can feel like a brand and like a grift, like we used to be like the progressive Christian evangelical grift. And what I've appreciated so much about watching your journey is to see you follow the thread of truth, like at any cost. Yeah. And even when it's painful, no matter where that leads you, even out of Christianity, like whatever that means, you're following your integrity and the truth and exposing that. And so I think that's so necessary right now and important to have your voice in this conversation. And this season of our very first baby podcast is on children's spirituality, because there is my work is with children and about recognizing the innate spirituality that does not have to be Christian spirituality. It's just innate connection that children have to something bigger than themselves, and how to foster that and nurture that in healthy, non-harmful ways. And the ethics, my background is the ethics around that. Ooh. And so your voice in this conversation is just very needed, and we're excited to have you speak to that today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you mentioned the evangelical grift because it's real.
Yeah.
My advice is look
Cool.
for the weirdos. Look for the weirdos who just keep saying their stuff no matter how many people listens to it. I'm like, that's kind of more where I'm at. And same, kind of back to you. It's like I came out of being heavily indoctrinated and spiritually abused as a child. I was a Christian publisher. I was a Christian missionary. I did all this stuff. And now that I'm not a Christian, I obviously have a lot of anger and feelings to process, but I'm also just so amazed at Christians who are open to an interfaith and pluralistic world and to not indoctrinating their children and letting the chips fall where they may. And I just think that this has to be a part of our future. This has to be. So, I'm really glad to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're just gonna have a great conversation. Danny, were you gonna say something?
No, I was, just no. I had just a lot of jokes about my own formation here that I'm sure won't come up.
Yes. Yeah. It will probably come up. I wondered if we could just start with your work in the Strong-Willed Project and like what that is and where that came from and what,
Yeah.
a little bit about that.
So I've been asked this quite a bit in the past week. When did I start getting obsessed with James Dobson, his parenting methods, all of that? And I had to think about it for a bit because Danny and I were just connecting over Dorothy Day. That was the last book I published. I did a biography of Dorothy Day, specifically how she started the Catholic Worker in 1933. She's an anti-fascist, anarchist, Catholic legend, After that was published, I left Christianity and then got really into fascism, studying fascism. I wonder why. I wonder why. I mean, again, going back to Dorothy, it kind of gave me some permission to follow those threads. And as I was reading books like The Mass Psychology of Fascism, they kept saying that the Nazis focused on the family and they focused on the heteronormative patriarchal family. And if you can replicate those authoritarian patterns in the home, you can replicate those patterns in the government. Right. And so I thought, oh my God, this sounds like focus on the family, but like American fascism versus German Christian fascism, both Christian, both were obsessed with controlling sexuality, both, and so it wasn't a very well, I mean, people aren't reading this book anymore. It was published in 1933, The Mass Psychology of Fascism, but that is really what got me started. And so our Strong-Willed Project, my partner's a therapist, so he was coming at it from more of like this standpoint of when I started rereading all these Dobson parenting books that, by the way, sold millions and millions of copies. And according to Dobson's own literature, over 1/3 of the American population in the 1980s was reading his work on how to parent. And his parenting method just boiled down to you need to spank your child every time they assert their will, starting at like 18 months. Okay. So this is during a time, again, where all of the research was coming out that corporal punishment and physical spanking was really harmful to a child's development. This is Mr. Rogers. This is Eric Erickson. These are all these people, Flo, that you probably are well aware of. And Dobson said those are permissive parenting people, and they're the reason we have every problem in our society, especially the problem of white youth going out and protesting the Vietnam War, agitating for civil rights, and everybody's becoming gay. We need to go back, right? Everybody's gay now, or at least gay people are inching towards rights. And also women were inching towards rights. Okay. And Dobson couldn't have any of that. And so he was like, we got to spank the babies. We got to view them as evil, manipulative, defiant. So one of the hallmarks of his parenting books is he taught parents to view their toddlers as their peer who is engaged in a battle for salvation, right, of the world. And just think about that for a minute, Flo. Just what it does to tell parents, don't think about any developmental needs. Don't think about any developmental phases. These kids know what they're doing and they're asking for it. begging to be spanked. That's what Dobson says.
And override your possible good intuition as a parent.
Yeah,
that
he
might
said,
be towards love.
and he said, if you don't spank them, you're not a good Christian. And his works
Mhm.
became so popular that if you went to church, and it didn't have to even be an evangelical church. It was
Yeah.
so many different kinds of religious groups that were somehow centered around patriarchy in the United States. If you went to this church and your toddler disobeyed you, everybody was watching and everybody was looking to see how you responded, because how your kids responded was a reflection of how much you yourself as a parent were committing to Christianity. So that's why we came up with the term religious authoritarian parenting methods to describe Dobson and many others who came after him, sort of in the Christian publishing world, because for them, religion was such an important component to getting people to implement these authoritarian style parenting methods using corporal punishment. So in the beginning, my thesis was just, okay, this is why we have Donald Trump 2.0. I mean, this is authoritarian parenting methods lead to authoritarianism in society. And then eventually, just because I started researching all this stuff Dobson talked about constantly, my thesis started to shift a little bit. And now I'm at the point where I'm like, I think on top of all of that, he also appears to have been making materials that appeal to abusive people in general and to serial child predators in particular. So that's like where I'm at now. But most of the project Strong Willed has been aimed at unpacking the history of Dobson, who formed him, including, he worked for 10 years with a very well-known white supremacist eugenicist known as Paul Popenoe. And he actually started Focus on the Family based off of Popenoe's organization. That was a positive eugenics movement. So looking at the history and telling people, if you grew up in these homes, you probably have some long-term impacts. That's where what my partner specializes in. Sort of like, you probably have a hard time accessing self-compassion. You probably have a hard time accessing autonomy. You probably, either have the fawn response around people in power or something, and I'm more looking at the history of where we got to where we're at. So that's sort of what the project is, but mostly we want to help people, develop autonomy and find solidarity with each other, because so many of us, our parents, our church community, our faith community, the culture in general is like, what? It wasn't a big deal. Everybody spanked their kids. This is not something even worth talking about. And I think more and more people are starting to say, like, actually, what happens during those really formative years for a child, it really matters, both on an individual level and for society as a whole. Sorry, I just rambled a bunch.
No, that was like perfect. And I was gonna say too, like when you go on your website, your Substack, there's also a list of chapters that are just so well researched and well informed and so comprehensive. Like, I think it's such a deep dive, but like so good as far as the information that's there. And I couldn't help, I was thinking as you were talking, I was a child of the 80s. I was born in 1980. But my mom, who was like in a Baptist church, but had been had protested the Vietnam War, and like she had been like in that group of people, and then came into this like late in the game Christianity in her life. And I was baby number 5 for her, and she was I was very stubborn was the word, but not strong-willed, but stubborn. And but but this was other people. I remember it was, I was. But other people, my mom has all these stories. This is a shout out to her. I'm very grateful, because this was the 80s, and people in her church gave her the Dobson book and said, you have to get Floey under control. Like, and she's like laughing, because she's like, I've raised 4 other kids and they're giving me parent advice. But she looked at the book. She did for a minute feel that like guilt of maybe I'm not doing this right. And she very half-heartedly threatened a spanking to me one time. And I looked at her and said that, no, I'm going to spank you. And she like lost it laughing and was like, okay, that's like, didn't stick. So I'm
Wow.
grateful for that. But I do remember the feeling of the judgment. Like it's there. Like as a child, I clearly remember the other adults looking at me and judging my mom.
Yes,
I remember
totally.
that. I remember the judgment of her from the other
Yes.
adults.
It was real. It was real.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting for me and my story is that I was like the golden child in my
Mhm.
family. I'm the middle of 3, and I just took it all so seriously. I believed it all, and this is kind of common because that was the desired results from Dobson's
Yeah.
particular method. So he published his first parenting book called Dare to Discipline in 1970, and then he wrote a follow-up called The Strong-Willed Child, which was published in
Mhm.
1977. Now, what happened in families that utilized Dobson methods, even if they didn't read the books, there was like people are just talking about this. Maybe they said stubborn child, but
Yeah.
maybe they said strong-willed child. The strong-willed child was like the enemy in the family, right? The kid who just, for whatever reason, Dobson's methods didn't quite work. Their
Mhm.
spirit wasn't broken, so you had to just try harder. And what's really sad is when you go back and read the book, The Strong-Willed Child, like the first story he tells is about beating the shit out of his little dog. He had like a little wiener
Oh
dog named
gosh.
after Sigmund Freud, and he talked about
God, you
getting
cannot make this stuff
you
up.
can't make it up.
No.
And
Gosh.
he's like, and we had this battle. He had his belt. He's just and then the dog obeyed him every day
God.
since. And he was like, and this is why I'm qualified to write this book. And so I think we give people a lot of like a pass, like, oh, it was the 70s, it was the 80s, it was the 90s. But I'm like, the story starts off with him beating a
Yeah.
tiny dog. And what kind of person does this? I just found this New York Times article that was sort of talking about how people weren't really taking evangelical media seriously for how kind of deranged it is. And this was
Mhm.
in like the 1990s when the apocalypse panic was starting to
Yep.
really ramp up. And this guy who actually wrote a book on thought reform or mind control named Robert J. Lufton, he was writing about Dobson and authors like Frank Peretti. And he said, like,
Mhm.
when you look at these materials, like Dobson's just a sadist. He's just a sadist.
Yeah.
And all these people are listening to him. What does this mean? And I'm like, thank you. That's how
Yeah.
I feel now. But that's not
Yeah.
what most people were saying about him.
No, Danny and I talk all the time about the masochistic nature of evangelicalism and
I think it's
yeah.
a shame addiction.
Yes.
Mm.
As I work with people that like who begin to distrust me as a pastor, it's when I don't shame them or the ones they want shamed.
Yeah.
And it is like an addict who it's like, oh, I can go get my hit somewhere else. I don't know. That's the thing. And like contempt, that's as I read your work and listen, it makes me wonder about Dobson. And just like there's so much contempt for children.
Yes.
But when I have a lot of friends in the PCA world and they like
Which is Presbyterian Church in America.
Oh
Okay.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, not PCUSA, Presbyterian
Okay.
Church in America. Yeah.
Reformed.
Reformed.
Like the contempt for their spouses is like
Yeah.
a lot of their brand, you know, and it's like they call their
so
kids
weird.
little sinners and they're like, it's so hard to be married. And the reason God has us get married is so that we'll be sanctified by living with somebody we
We're like,
don't
what?
like.
Just live with someone you like. Like, what is
Yeah.
wrong? Like,
Yeah.
Helping, but the contempt it breeds and like,
Yeah.
and the shame. And then also like the mediocrity. And just, yeah, like Dobson's a mediocre fella, you know, and like what people are willing to do and what people are willing to fund when somebody makes them feel like an expert in something. Yeah, it's Trumpism, it's Dobbs, it's just like that. I don't know, I can't articulate, but the contempt and the mediocrity and the shame, it's just like, damn, how do we break that addiction?
And it starts, like I was talking to Danny right before we got on this call that like I had a memory of a friend of ours who, because my work at the church we're at is primarily with the kids, and somebody was saying, "Oh, we visited another church, and their first visit there, the lesson for kids was on the wrath of God. Like that was
Yeah.
the lesson
Yeah.
for children."
I mean, how are you going to keep them obedient,
Yes.
right? Unless they
Yeah.
understand the consequences of disobedience. And that is like, I did this art project last year because I've just been immersed in all these horrible evangelical parenting manuals and doing all this research. So I did this whole thing where I turned a local coffee shop into like a church, an evangelical church from 1994, including like a children's church area. And I just had collected hundreds of books and materials about obedience and just put them all in one little corner of this
Wow.
coffee shop.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to communicate, like, that was the main
Yep.
message. We were
It
actually
was.
being taught in these spaces was obey or else, which fascism loves that message, my God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, just comply with
Yeah.
every insane order and you'll be fine, which, you know, spoiler alert, you won't. But that's what they say. And that's exactly what religious authoritarians are saying about ICE
Yeah.
at this moment. It's
Yes.
because that's what they've said to their kids. They've become locked into this method of living. And Danny, it's interesting you mentioned shame because Dobson really promoted himself as this like folksy, gentle guy because he had like a little twang. He was born in Louisiana and he had this like soft spoken voice and he mostly did radio. But he said, you know, the way he is telling people to spank is not harmful to a child. What's harmful to a child is when you hurt them out of anger or rage, or you like take their arm out of the socket. I'm like, yes, of course that's abusive. My God. He's like, no. When you do it in a calm and logical manner, there's no ill effects. And you just get these perfect children. But in reality, what he was teaching was a ritualized form of abuse that was absolutely centered on shame and then force the child at the end of the ritual to say, thank you. I know this is loving. Give their parent a hug. And then it's trauma bonding at the end. So to me,
gosh,
it's
absolutely.
actually
Yeah.
worse and more manipulative because he had this whole thing like you tell your kid, again, they're toddlers, right?
Yeah.
And up to what, 12, 13, 14, 15, some people are spanking their teenage daughters and it's disgusting. It's disgusting to do that to anybody, but it gets really wild. But the way he described it, it's like you tell your child, I'm doing this because I love you, because God wants me to. Then you physically hurt your child to the point where they cry by hitting them on a very sensitive and honestly sexually charged area of their body.
Yep.
And then at the end, they have to basically say, thank you. I don't, and give the parent a hug and everybody walks away. Now, who's feeling good in that scenario? The parent, right? The parent is forcing this trauma bonding at the end. Therefore, they could say this all went fine. But what do you think actually happens with toddlers? Dobson was like, if they cry more than like a minute, they're being manipulative. So you have to spank them again. And you keep doing that pattern, keep saying, I'm doing this because I love you until they can finally acquiesce and say, stop crying, say sorry, say thank you, hug the parent. And it's so disturbing.
No.
I'm going to go lay down after I say this, but it's the Eucharist for a lot of people. That's all. That is the liturgy of like, say you're awful, come get your spanking, and you get it.
And guess who loves that? Predators. Predators love that, but also victims who have been conditioned
that part of
to
it.
accept it.
Jesus.
They both freaking love, because that's what this physical punishment is. It's like, once I'm done hurting you, it's all over. But for the child, it's not over. Their nervous system has just absorbed the reality that their caregiver is hurting them and calling it love. Now, what do you think a little kid's going to do in that situation? Are they going to say, my parent is hurting me and I can't trust them? No, they can't do that. They rely on this person for everything. So what they do is they say, there must be something wrong with me. I must be bad. And here the shame cycle is born, right? And they'll need religion the rest of their life to absolve them of these feelings they have. And it's really sad. I believe his method, Dobson's parenting method, is ritualized abuse. I mean, he made it into this ritual. And
Yep.
I think you're exactly right. I think about all the church services I've gone to with men standing up, giving the communion address, saying like, I'm a worm, I'm
a
worse
worm.
than a wretch.
Yeah.
It's almost comical, but it's not comical because
Totally. Yeah.
they might not believe that at all, honestly.
Yeah.
And then there's people like me in the pew who's like, yeah, God, I'm a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And I need God to forgive me. You know, it's wild.
And every week you have to repeat that.
Yeah.
Like,
Totally.
yeah.
Which feeds in that need then to be superior to another tradition, to another ethnicity, right? Like that feeds the scapegoating even more, because it's like,
Totally.
well, I'm a piece of shit, but not as
much as them. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
And they need
totally.
me, like they're gonna be lost if I don't hold to this truth. And
Even like the policing of, we had experienced this in our journey of like people policing other people who take communion, because it's like, I mean, it's wild. Like, but it's like, oh, they're not like, are they repentant of these things? It's like that word is even so triggering, but like, and then going through divinity school and learning things like, oh, you know, like the verses that are like, you'll heap condemnation on yourself if you don't take communion in the right way.
Oh
like
my
that,
God. I was so
like,
scared of that growing up.
no, totally. And then learning that that was not about individual, like I had a bad thought, but it was about people who were actually holding food and sacrament from the poor people in the community. Like that's what that verse was about.
Which is like every mega church right now.
Every
by
mega
the way.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, no wonder they didn't spin it that way. That did not work for them.
I mean, I don't know even know if we want to get into all this, but even thinking about Dobson's crusade against gay people.
Oh, yeah.
It's fascinating when you look into what were the things actually being talked about in scripture. It was pedophilia.
Yes.
It was men abusing children sexually.
Yep.
And somehow that's never what Christians talk about happening in their own communities, because it's happening all the time. And as I'm making the case currently
all the time
for our series in Strong-Willed, it's these parenting methods led to children who became perfect victims for people to exploit and abuse in so many ways, including sexually. Plus, in these religious authoritarian communities, there's this doctrine of forgiveness, right? Yes. For abusers if they have power, right? And they use that in a few different ways. One of the ways we keep seeing over and over again is they convince the victims, like, you can't talk about this because you'll ruin the work of the church. You don't want to besmirch the name of Christianity. Again, going back to why it's so important, we call it religious authoritarianism, because that religion is silencing. If you believe in your heart that Christianity is the only true religion, the only way, you're not going to say something to damage that, right? And so it's just really sad to me how the goodness of Christianity has been used to silence people. And it continues to do that over and over again. I do think with the Epstein files, we're starting to see a tipping point, because we're starting to see it's everywhere. It's not just an evangelical Christian problem, obviously. It's not just a religious authoritarian problem. It's a people in power problem. And we do need to take it very seriously. I guess my wheelhouse is just how religion and Christianity in particular has been used to not only enable people to abuse, but to get away with it. And that's the part that I just can't let go.
No.
I think that's how the three of us have found ourselves on StreamYard today.
Yeah, I mean, gosh. Yeah, when you were talking about the self-blame, I had a meeting with a children's chaplain at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital, this woman who's doing amazing work. And my thesis was on prayer with children, because of how the harm of so many harmful ways of using adult language, and even just like prayer in general, just being so careful with that, because there's for my own history coming out of like prayers for healing for people with cancer. And it's like, okay, that's like actually very, very, very
damaging to a child to like
totally.
have that, you know, to be hopeful for some kind of miracle when statistically that's like impossible. Like that to me is another form of abuse, to like say that this is a psychological abuse. But anyway, she was telling me, I was talking about like, what does that do to a child to like pray this way and then it's not answered? And we were talking about that, and she said, I was coming from at the time a more Christian probably perspective of, oh, that's going to ruin their perception of God. And she was like, it's like worse than that, because it ruins their perception of themselves, because they think I didn't do something right if my prayer to God is not answered. And that was probably for me the tipping point of like the psychological care, the developmental appropriateness. All of these things are the most important when considering children and religion or spirituality. And like that should inform the path of children's spirituality, not like the other way around, which has been so much. It's like the Christianity will override the psychology and be like, well, but the Bible says,
Well, so I grew up in a charismatic house, and so those kinds of things really weighed heavily on me, and I always thought it was because of me. And so I developed religious OCD as a child, just trying to pray without ceasing to make sure there's no sin in my life, so that when I was, taken to these prayer meetings, if I prayed for someone's healing, it would work because I was true. And it was just a devastating, like, I can't explain my inner landscape to people as a child. It was torture. It was like living in hell. And my mom also believed in the end times, so she was always telling me the world's going to end. So my story is, even when I was like a senior in high school, I did not get a driver's license or apply to college because Y2K was happening. And I believed it so deeply, and just nobody knew, my mom knew, but she didn't care about my inner world, and I just think like there's probably a lot more stories like that than we even know. I'm trying to come around. Obviously, I have a pendulum swing because of my own experience with evangelical Christianity or any kind of, what's the word? I'm forgetting the word, but some kind of relationship with the divine where the divine speaks back to you.
Right.
I'm very worried about that. But what I will say is Dobson loved to say this in his books. He's like, he hated Catholics. He's like, but they got one thing right. They say, give me a child. Give me a child for the first 8 years of their life, and you'll have a Catholic for life. Right? Childhood indoctrination is the way to do this. If you don't focus on indoctrinating your child into this religion in the first 5 to 8 years of their life, it's all over. So he knew that was so important. What I would tell people, anyone listening, even if you're, if you're a person of faith, a Christian, what's so important is help a child develop a sense of self before they develop any kind of relationship to the divine, because that's the main problem that happens is when you teach a child to look to an outside locus of control to tell them what to do, to how to make choices, for how to feel. That is just teaching the child to ignore their body, their emotions, their thoughts, and their feelings. Now, if we can create the steady safety of learning how to do that for yourself, then I think later on you can add in some of these elements of the divine. Now, my own kids are very helpful in teaching me about this stuff too. One of my kids is a little more open to Christianity. The other one is kind of drawn to pagan stuff. And it's been really interesting to be like, they want to connect, and they want to connect to something as long as they have a really strong sense of self and are in touch with their feelings, their body, their emotions, their thoughts. Like, I say that's great, but the reason why I think it's helpful to look at Dobson parenting, all these things, it's like, look at the way he did it and try and do it the opposite. You know what I mean? Like, focus on that inner development, sense of self, core sense of self, being good, right? And
being good.
You can trust your body when it tells you someone's unsafe. Now, again, going back to the spanking, how is a child supposed to ever trust their body if their body is saying, I don't want to be hurt, I don't want to be, but I'm being told this is good, this is what God wants, this is you know.
Yeah.
So there's my big spiel.
And it is, I mean,
No,
your
yeah.
language, the your chapter on culture wars and children being the casualties of the culture
Yes.
war, and that war, what it reminds me of as well is it's a war economy, right? Like nations make money when they're at war. Ross Gay, do you know Ross Gay's work? Poet,
Yeah.
essayist. In Inciting Joy, he's got this incredible passage about we all know who makes money off of their wars, whether that's war on drugs, war on the family, war on whatever. But that war language, that war economy, that patriotism of war in all these places is so fascinating. And like what war always lands on the children.
Yeah.
And what you're describing sounds like the way we have to, like, gear up for war communally. And it's so isolating, it's so individualistic, it's so horrible and violent, and then it's told it's virtuous and it's like saving the world.
Yeah.
In this messed up war space. I don't know that I have a question there, but I hear the war language in it all. And it's always the kids, it's always the poor, it's always the ones that are most sacrificed to the gods of war, which ultimately it's death, like sacrificed to.
Yeah, and I think with the most recent drops in the Epstein files, people are seeing so many connections to basically people like Steve Bannon and others communicating with Jeffrey Epstein and basically saying, like, if we're gonna win, we have the working class on our side when it comes to hating immigrants. Like, we're gonna vote in the right wing all over the place because of that. And the same thing happened with queer people and then trans people. And I think like we are starting to see how these culture wars have been manufactured by powerful, rich people so they could be more powerful and more rich. And they're all freaking pedophiles, by the way, as well. But I think an under talked about story is the war on children. Obviously, pedophilia brings that to mind, but I'm saying there's also this abuse of children happening in so many ways in the American culture. And if you look into how far we are behind when it comes to child rights, to viewing children as human beings deserving of rights, it's so depressing. And that's because of evangelicals, again, being used by these powerful people.
Yeah. That for me, that passion, that advocacy, like my journey even in all this started as like a musician wanting to make art for kids. At the time it was like Bible music, but it was like, oh, there's only bad art out there because people don't care enough about kids to make good art for them. Like they're assuming like we can just churn out whatever. And I remember just it being really, it's always been really important to me to take children seriously and to treat them. We say this all the time, and other people have used this phrase, but not as deficient adults, but as like whole people that are deserving of the highest quality of care, of protection, of dignity, of respect. And even like you were saying, I feel like I'm most critical of it in high control religion, evangelical spaces, but I see it in like on threads and Twitter when people are like, I just want to go play somewhere where there's no kids, or like,
totally.
Or like babies shouldn't be allowed on airplanes. And it's like, I am so, supportive of like living a child-free life, if that's your choice as a adult human in the world, like as a not wanting to be a caregiver, totally understand that. But like, we can't imagine saying like, I just don't want to be around any other type of person. Like, I don't want to be around like this whole group of people, or like, I don't, it's just, it's wild that we feel comfortable, or people feel comfortable saying that about children. Like, I just don't like kids.
And then you justify it by calling them bad, right? In that economy, you tell them, well, they're little sinners, they're little pieces of shit too. We got to make them not be pieces of shit. So we're justified in like landing our contempt on them. We're not, you know what I mean? But in that, in that space, and just
in that contempt being like, might just be, we talked to Ryan Record the other day. It was like just dysregulation. Like that child is just learning how to be a human. And we're like, oh, they're sinning because they're hungry. Like I mean,
that's kind of where my partner Crispin and I keep camping out is like, if people just could understand what normal childhood development is, I think that could help us in so many ways.
Yes.
Now, again, I'm sorry to keep bringing this up, but
no,
this is just what I'm obsessed with. So because of my work on Dobson, I got obsessed with this presidential commission he was on about pornography, but he ended up learning a ton about serial child predators, how they operate, how they get away with their crimes, how they're most often the pillar of the community. So, you know, the pastor, the little league coach, the business guy, and that's how they get away with it, because nobody wants to think their buddy, their friend, the you know, whatever is doing this. But one of the things I discovered when researching the profile of a child molester is that they believe children are little adults. Okay, so they see them as peers, and they see them as they no concept of developmental difference. And like when I read that, I was like, oh my God, like this is a hallmark of abusive parenting methods, right? Is to Dobson called the toddlers tyrants, dictators, like sinners, like what do some of the evangelical authors call them? Vipers in diapers. Like that's how pedophiles think. Okay. If you don't want to think like a pedophile, you better start engaging with children as their age and development, you know, like where they're actually at. So that's again another thing I want to throw out there. Is like, if you read all of that, great. You're thinking like a predator, just so you know.
Yep. Whew.
Man.
Sorry, I do this.
Vipers and diapers.
You gotta sit with that one. You gotta sit with that one.
I pictured this like little street gang of babies on their tricycles, and their gang name is Vipers and Diapers. Wholesome. But so I in Liam Ramos, this little 5-year-old boy, right, who's kidnapped by the United States government. I was like, so much of this, we talked about it like being Eucharistic in the sickest way, but also the Genesis story of Abraham and Isaac, and how this is such a replication of that. And like, it dawned on me a few weeks ago, I was like thinking about that little guy's name and Ramos, and I was like, is that connected to ram? And the etymology, like it's thicket. Like,
okay, gosh, wow.
And just the like, I have a friend named David who's like, there are no unrelated phenomena, David Dark. And like, it's like the universe is calling us into, hey, look, you've made this little guy the ram in a thicket, right? And you've justified it. And like, this is the lamb, this is the ram that God is providing in that sick way in the scapegoat world. But like, as you talk about the vipers and diapers, and like this kid's name is actually ram caught in a thicket. Or one take on that name, and that we're so deaf to it. That's not the right word, numb to it all. And just like, it's just begging us to wake up. And even that in I think like a merciful way, like come back to humanity, come back to the connection that you talk about your kids, right? Pagan, Christian, just like, could we all be connected? Come back to each other and heal. And, it's just the way it's used for evil, vipers and diapers, and how even in that space there is a way out, like there is a waking up,
which requires calling it out, and them and not, like you have been saying, like the forgiveness piece, like not jump, like not that, like not
And who gets that and who doesn't, right? The little league coach who's doing it to abuse kids, we like, again, I keep saying we, just like, but like that's justified. We can't confront that. There has to be mercy here. He needs to be called up to the front with his wife or whatever. Meanwhile, like, beating a kid because they have to be the one, and it just all lands on them over and over.
I mean, I'm so glad you brought up the Abraham and Isaac story, because I view James Dobson's books, again, I keep talking about him because he was sort of like the first of the modern movement.
Apologies.
No, that's,
and then there's all these copycats. And if people were raised with some of the other books, they're even worse, if I'm being honest. But to me, these books serve as the Abraham Isaac story. When you get a parent to hurt their child in the name of God and to ignore their cries, ignore their pain, you just ensnared those parents for life to say this has to be good or else I'm hurting my children for what, you know? So
Right.
to me, the Abraham Isaac story is so connected to these books. I'm glad you brought it up. And I just find it so horrifying how it's used to ensnare people. I do think some people who are already prone to wanting to abuse their kid were drawn to these books, but plenty of people
Yeah.
who were not were caught
Yeah.
up in it. Now, what we have had to do from the beginning with Strong Willed is we've had to say, like, we're focusing on survivors of these parenting methods.
Yeah.
We don't really have the capacity to work with people who utilize these methods and feel really guilty about it.
Right.
If you feel guilty, like, that's a great sign. You deserve therapy. You deserve ways to process that. And if you're able to take accountability, name the harm you've perpetuated, own your shit,
Yeah.
and work towards repair, like that's amazing. And that's great. And there's people out there who are doing it. It's not the majority, I'll tell you
No.
that. But there are those folks out there. And I think that's been an interesting place for us is to say, like, estrangement is happening in so many of these families and
Yeah.
communities that utilize these methods, and it doesn't have to be like that. If you could
Right.
acknowledge your role in the harm, that is just honestly such a huge first step, and that's the most difficult one, I think, because it was so connected to their faith, and
Yeah.
showing that they're devoted to God. Why would they ever apologize for that? So it's so sticky.
Yeah. A couple things. Well, I was my brain is like a million things at once. But like I was thinking about even my story with my mom of being like it's so easy to dismiss that as like, oh, they were just a product of their time and like everybody was telling them to do this. And I understand, empathize on one level, but then again, like she didn't. Like she was like, and she was in it. Like she was in a church.
Yeah.
She was
Exactly.
like all in and she was like, but this is not right. And so like it that piece of my story, I think, has helped me to be able to say, like, first of all, trust your intuition as a
Yes.
parent.
Mhm.
And secondly, that like the product of their time excuse just doesn't hold. And there can be, I think there can be, you know, some amends made if there's real, acknowledgement of the harm done. But
Flo, I don't know if you know this story, Flo. So, DL, I grew up in a cult in Southern California. 400 people followed a guy to Nashville when I was a freshman.
like a real legit,
sexual abuse. But all the sexual abuse began to come out, I don't know, early 2000s. And there was this meeting of the whole thing. The woman who had sort of been like the most sacrificed that we knew about at that point talked about what she had been through, and the room turned on her. And what the cult leader's son-in-law, who was like, there's always like two sons who aren't capable to take over, and also the son-in-law's not, and the daughter's the smartest, but she can't become the leader, so it becomes this, and that replication is fascinating to me. But anyway, so he's in charge, and he says they used to think putting butter on a burn was the way to heal it. Now we know that's not the case, but you could never be mad at somebody who thought putting butter on a burn was, you know, for doing that. But like what pissed me off so much that night, and still it's like these we're gonna use the E, right? Capital E, these motherfuckers. Like you were telling us you knew the secrets of the universe. Like this guy was telling us he was the Apostle Paul for the world in 1986. But like butter on a burn. So it's like, what is it? Are you like the mystic guy on the planet, or did you have something to learn? But again, that intersection of arrogance and mediocrity, and like it's,
but we didn't know better. Yeah,
we didn't know better. But also, if you didn't listen to us, you had no hope in your life. And that space, like you're saying, that will never be repentance when there's an ounce of excuse. I hate it. Yeah, again, I don't know. I'm ranting more than asking questions.
No, I love it, but it goes back to even like Dobson's methods, right? You don't give your child an inch of grace.
Right.
They get corporal punishment every time they say no to you, every single time. And yet when one of them does something horrible, what is it? It's grace. It's like if you had shown your kids that grace, I might be more inclined to believe you, but you fucking didn't, bro. So you know, I sometimes I just find myself vibing with the words of Jesus, and you know, you reap what you sow. I love that. I freaking love that. Didn't Jesus say like it's better to have a millstone hung around your neck and you be thrown into the sea rather than you abuse a child? I'm like, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. You know?
And like, how is that not obvious? You know what I mean? Like that would be debatable.
Or be like a child. This was like my whole work was like, be like a child before you can like see the kingdom of heaven. Like, what does that mean? Like, it doesn't mean be naive and trust everything. It means like, what does a child do? A child says no and talks back and is messy and is in their body. Like those are that's what I think being a child is, you know?
Wow. So. I thank you. That really helped reframe some stuff for me because my mom used it. She used to always tell me I had the most beautiful childlike faith. And that just meant I didn't listen to anyone but her, you know?
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, I love hearing you say it's messy, it's strong-willed, it's being in your body, because kids really are.
Yeah.
They're so much better
No, 100%.
than us adults. Like, that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It reminds me, one of my favorite books is The Little Prince, and how the sort of like the characteristics that he has that I love so much. It's like when he got hold of a question, he wouldn't let it go. And then just this consistent, like meeting people who would say something about the world, grown-ups who would say things about the world, and he would just always say, that's not very serious. And that like refusal to let go of a question mixed with that barometer of like, well, that's not serious. And I think all this Dobson, it's like, you're not a serious person. You're doing serious damage, but you're not a serious person. And every kid knows that. You know, like on some visceral level, obviously we're raised in these situations where we aren't allowed to know that, but there's a piece of us that just knows, well, that's not serious. And I'd better freaking seriously keep my eyes open for it, because it will hurt me, but it's also, there's no way that's true. Which also, I remember as I listened to you, I mean, a prayer of mine the whole time when I was in a cult and today, like, is just, I don't care what it will cost me, you know, if I were to find out, like, if I were to not be a Christian anymore, like, if it's not true, and I don't mean like the only way, that's not where I am these days, but like, just telling God, the divine, like, just please give me something real and true. I don't care what that's named. Like, I don't need the system, but I need something that like is real, probably even more than true in that space. But I really appreciate your work, because all those things, The Little Prince, I appreciate the way you don't let go of the questions and pursue the serious nature of it all.
And you know, I've been an existentialist my whole life, and that's why I love The Little Prince myself. And I do think where I'm at right now, as far as like what's true, because again, both of you guys as pastors, as people who work with people, I'm sure you're going to see this continue to happen. We are seeing such an intense unveiling with the Epstein files, and just how many people, businesses, media, artists, entertainment, you know, it's like, plus we have our little Christian fishes like Dobson, and you know, Epstein even like shared Dobson articles and all this stuff. People are going to have to deal with the fact that the reality that so many of us engage in was kind of orchestrated by horrible people. And what do you do with that? How do you find groundedness? How do you find truth? And I keep coming back to this really this core belief I have, which is, if we treat children better, the world will
Yes.
get better. Like
That's it.
the
Mhm.
world
Amen.
will get
Yes.
better. So Flo, Danny, I
Yes,
know you
that's-
guys are with me. I know there's plenty of Christians who are with me. And it's like, this has to be the thing I think we
It has
coalesce
to
around,
be.
because the
Yep.
abuse of children is central to the Epstein files.
Yep.
And we should take that seriously, going back
Yeah.
to me being serious about this. And therefore, if we take it seriously, it's like, create safe places for kids.
Yep.
Put in
Yep.
just the normal practices in your church, business, institution to protect kids. Like,
Yep.
the world will get better overnight. I promise
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
I promise you. So that's,
The-
I guess that's what I would tell people, you know?
100%. Yes. Yeah. I
And
can't.
both of
Yeah.
us, sorry, go ahead, Flo. I don't
No,
wanna-
no.
Just the, like, we both have an affinity for anarchy. I really believe, like, the world these days, like, it's all been exposed. It's all anarchy. It's either the anarchy of the wealthy,
Yeah,
or the anarchy of the children. And I really think what Jesus is saying is, choose the anarchy of the children. What you just said, make it better for a kid. I'm here to turn hearts against each other, and it's the sons against the fathers. It's John the Baptist. Like, I'm going to turn the hearts back towards each other, and it'll be when justice is done for the future, when the ones who have accumulated wealth stop accumulating wealth and give their coats to the kids. Like, it's all like choosing that anarchy of the children. And then I think, again, like Jesus, not in a proselytizing way, but just to, like, one of the things that remains compelling about him in these spaces, he said, oh, they'll hate you. Like, when he wasn't like, and then you will be welcomed and celebrated in every room you go into. It's like, choose the anarchy of the children, make it better for them today, and be ready, because it will be hated by those people who built it on the backs of the children. So yeah, that invitation into, let's choose this joyful anarchy of the children who are actually in their bodies, who can teach us, let's not give them more things to unlearn.
Wow, this needs to be a book, both of you. I hope you're writing a book about the anarchy of children.
I've never heard you say the anarchy of children,
amazing.
but he's writing about anarchy. I'm writing about children's spirituality in a way that is just like trusting children. But
that's so connected, don't you think?
Yeah, it's so connected.
I love that.
Yeah. No, and I think both of us having, or at least, like, I feel like now on the other side of parenting, like, I've got 2 kids that are in college, and having chosen them, and having had this is a long story for another day, but like, our church had gone through, like, left its denomination, did all, over protecting our LGBTQ folks and our children, and choosing them over the denominational institution. And so, having had that experience, and seeing my kids being able to celebrate who they are, like, they're not Christian, like, they don't go to church, but their church still chose them, and like,
That's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful, because it's not with expectations. There's not like, I think they feel loved. I think they are respected in a way that's like real, not for what they believe or who they might, or like what they might believe someday. Like, that's irrelevant. Like, it's who they are is what matters. And I think, having seen that, we say this all the time, like, it is hard, but it doesn't have to be that hard. Like, it doesn't, like, it's a simple, it's costly perhaps, but it's a simple choice.
Yeah. I mean, in America, right? Children are being kidnapped by masked agents, right? It happened in my neighborhood. A 7-year-old girl, her parents took her to the emergency room because she had a fever. I live in Oregon. They kidnapped her and her parents, and she was sent to Texas in a detention center, which is basically a concentration camp.
Yeah.
Now, we had a local pastor of a mainline denomination get up in front of our city council and just plead with the city council, like, we have to declare ICE an emergency. And I just thought, like, this is exactly what churches should be doing.
Yeah.
Like, this is it. This is your moment. Everyone who says they care about children, like, now's the time. And some churches are rising to that. And I have been so grateful to see it, but I want to see that continue on more and more.
Same. And I think it's a very real unveiling of, like, because I've had this shock sometimes, of being able to not being able to reconcile, the like same people who are like, but the children all the time, not actually caring about the children, but it
Right.
is an unveiling to me of like, oh yeah, it was never about the children for them.
Yes.
It was
Oh,
about
yeah.
power and control. And we didn't even touch on this yet, but like Danny and I talked about this before, and listening to your work, and like whiteness and
Oh,
all
yeah.
of the things, like it's all tied in together.
So true. Well,
Um,
I'm sort of shocked by like I've just really enjoyed both of your like spiritual reflections as they
Oh.
came up. They both really resonated with me. So
Oh.
thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that with me.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank you.
listening. We're I think we're so over, like we talk all the time about how we're probably going to be out of jobs soon because we're not very good at like maintain or recruiting, all these things, like whatever the words are that people use, but like we laugh all the time, because if people come up to us and say they've been traumatized by the church and can't come to church, we're like, then don't go to church. Like that's
Exactly.
like not like, then don't go. Like that's like, that's not a good place.
Yeah.
But it's it's an interesting.
But some people really need those safe spaces, I think,
yes,
as well. And you probably
Yeah.
know this too. So I'm like, it's
Yeah.
such a unfun job to have what you both have. But I just think by centering children, it's like this is going to help people. This is going to help us all if we can keep getting this message out there.
Yeah. And well, on a positive note, to have been through the journey, even with our small church community and the people that have stayed, like to see that many people have coalesced around children and around what is good and true and real in the world, and what matters, and physical safety of people, that's not like, that is good spiritual care, not just like, are their souls saved or whatever.
And I think like if we can compliment and part of that group that you're talking about in St. Mary's, like we're so grateful to get to serve this community. Like I think they understand that focusing on the children is not focusing on the family. Like the nuclear family focus does not lead to caring for kids, especially marginalized kids. And it's like focusing on the family, the nuclear family, that becomes capitalism. Spending units, when it's like, okay, there's a kid kidnapped by the government, we can get into that, or we can build a more beautiful Sunday school room and put the money there because we care about kids. Like it's so insidious in those spaces. But that, just to say in this conversation, it's not centering children to center the nuclear family.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's like such a part of this disease.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I have 4 kids. Like I love my family. It also doesn't mean it's like it's been the most wonderful thing in this journey, and like becoming affirming in this. It's like just even going to protests, and it's like the most wholesome people on the planet.
Oh
like,
my God, it's so true. It's so
they
true.
think about blood sugar.
I know.
Before they go, and it's like,
I know.
It's so funny how it's so much more wholesome than what the brand of wholesomeness.
I had people in my life telling me that like supporting my gay kids was like letting them touch a hot stove. And I was like, but do you see them? Like, do you see how amazing they are and like what they're doing in the world? And like, can you just look and notice? Like, I will always joke that when people talk about the gay agenda, I'm like, it's my kid crocheting on the couch. Like, what are you talking about?
The gay agenda is human rights, and you can crochet your frogs all day.
You can crochet your frogs. Like, yeah.
I have a kid like that, so I get it.
Yeah. It's
thank
just
you
about
so
an
much.
hour, and so we're just so thankful for this conversation. Again, I've been like such an admirer from afar, and it's been really a joy to get to actually talk to you and see your face.
Thank you so much. I really
much.
enjoyed this, which is I was not expecting to, because honestly things are so wild right now. But thanks so much for this conversation and for hosting it.
Yeah, Yeah.
Thanks for being here. Great to meet you.
Yeah. And again, listeners, this is DL Mayfield, author and podcaster, and look at the project, the Strong Willed Project, and do the opposite of what the quote unquote Dr. James Dobson did. All right. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Blessed Uncertainty. Special thanks to Kyle Locke for producing, his brother Adam Locke for our logo, and Jay Lind for our theme music.